the only place for everything Vikings. 6, 1, 2, Vikings.
Welcome back to 612 Vikings. I am Dustin alongside Drew, and last night we had some NFL awards happening, and we also had a bet that Drew would shave his head if Kevin O'Connell won Coach of the Year, and unfortunately, oh, never mind. He didn't make that bet, you guys. But kind of getting that out of the way, Kevin O'Connell is your Coach of the Year, Drew. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's definitely well deserved. I believe he had the most first place votes, even with all the other tallying votes, second, third, fourth, all that. He ends up getting Coach of the Year, which is definitely a big accomplishment. It hasn't been done since, I believe, 1969 with Bud Grant. So it's been a very, very long time to see a Vikings coach on the podium winning that award. But it definitely shows that they've got the right guy and that they're heading in the right direction under a guy like with J.J. McCarthy in 2025.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of Lions fans. I know you're saying pre recording here that Lions fans wanted Dan Campbell. Washington fans wanted Dan Quinn. Rightfully so. They had really good seasons. I mean, if you look at it, starting with Dan Campbell, I mean he's had 16 IR players just on defense alone, and still made it to the playoffs. Still played a pretty solid couple games there at the end, despite missing all those players, and then just kind of got knocked out by Washington and Dan Quinn's team. That he could have also won Coach of the Year, and I don't think a lot of people would have been mad about it necessarily. Bias, I do think that Kevin deserved it more than both of those guys, but you could make a strong argument why all three of those guys could be in the running, and rightfully so. So Dan Quinn making it to the NFC Championship round, just a game away from the Super Bowl. We could have had if I want to be politically correct, I'll say Commanders for this one, but I just mean Redskins with this. Commanders and Chiefs, but it's a good season for Dan Quinn. Hopefully he can build upon that. Jane Daniels, he won Rookie of the Year. So they got a good thing going in Washington, but the Lions or Dan Campbell, he's gonna have to cry about this one too, and maybe have a better season next year.
Yeah. So first things first. So I know you brought, I believe the two coaches that finished 2 and 3 right behind him were Dan Quinn and Dan Campbell. So a lot of people are going to point to Dan Quinn's run in the postseason, make the NFC Championship game with the rookie quarterback. It's very impressive. It's just one of those things where this is a regular season award. And I believe they actually vote for it before the postseason even begins to make sure that they get they have that full understanding of this is a regular season award, not what they do in the postseason. So when those votes got locked in, no one knew Washington was going to go on and make a run towards the NFC title game. So I believe that's part of the reason why too. So just to eliminate any sort of bias for that. And then I think, Dan Quinn, he's the one that finished, or not Dan Quinn, Dan Campbell's the one that finished second in this. And like you said, he had all these players on IR. He definitely overcame adversity, but those really didn't start coming until the last 4, 5, 6 games of the season, where the Vikings had a backup quarterback essentially all season long. They had more wins over expected. They were at 6.5 wins, ended up winning 14. And the Lions were a team that were expected to win the division. So I think that's ended up being the factor with everything else, and just how much they overchanged on that defense going in. I mean, no one really thought Van Ginkel was going to be an All-Pro. Grenard even got a first-place vote for Defensive Player of the Year. And Blake Cashman, I don't think anyone really expected him to have the year that he had with the Vikings and how much impact he had. So I believe they only really lost the one game in the regular season with Cashman on the field. So I think those are just the reasons why it went to Kevin O'Connell over those two. So like I said, they had great seasons, but like I said, it's just Kevin O'Connell is the guy that just definitely deserved it more over those two guys.
Oh yeah, and I know I don't know if there's really any other candidates that would have been in the running. I mean, maybe Sean Payne with a guy like Bo Nix that had a pretty decent year. But Rookie of the Year, I don't think any Vikings players would have won that. I mean, Dallas Turner, he had little to no snaps all season. I think he only had 2 sacks and maybe a pick or something like that. So nothing eye-opening like Jared Verse. I think he won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Offensive Rookie of the Year, obviously Jaden Daniels. Nobody was going to beat him out. Just a really great year all around for him. Other than that, Offensive Player of the Year went to who? I didn't even see who that went to.
Saquon Barkley was the Offensive Player of the Year. So there was actually a lot of confusion based on who won the NFL MVP. Ended up going to Josh Allen. So this award usually goes hand in hand because normally your MVP is going to be an offensive player. So I think now it's starting to show, especially over the last 10 years, your MVP is going to be your quarterback, and then offense and defensive like MVPs are essentially just split to Offensive and Defensive Player of the Year. So your non-quarterback awards. So the reason, so Lamar Jackson got the first team All-Pro, and the same 50 voters are the ones that put, the quarterbacks and different players at different positions on first team, second team, and who makes those All-Pro lists. So they were saying that the reason why Josh Allen got MVP was because some voters had Saquon Barkley, I believe, finishing second in MVP voting, and then had Lamar Jackson at third. So when you do that, you're actually lowering their points. So it's kind of like the Heisman when they vote it. So it's based on first through fifth or whatever it is that they vote. There's a certain point system for each vote they get. So they had Lamar Jackson going down a little bit because some people really were more impressed with Saquon Barkley's season. They had him winning MVP over guys like Lamar Jackson and over guys like Josh Allen. So when that happened, those guys started slipping down the board. So that's why we saw Josh Allen end up getting the MVP over a guy like Lamar Jackson. And, Lamar Jackson was the first team All-Pro. So a lot of people were like, well, how do these same 50 voters put Josh Allen as MVP and Lamar Jackson as, the first team All-Pro? So that ended up being the reason why is just they had Lamar Jackson a little bit further down on the list for MVP. They had a guy like Saquon Barkley ahead of him. And I just thought that was really interesting to see because I did think that Josh Allen was going to win. I thought it was going to be something weird was going to go on just because of how many good offensive players there were this year, in comparison to last year. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting dynamic on how you saw that kind of split and change. And a lot of people were just really confused by that.
Yeah, I feel like you really couldn't have gone wrong with either Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. I wouldn't have been mad at either one, but I do think Josh Allen definitely, deserved that. He played like an MVP this year. Just kind of every year, just kind of building upon every season and getting better and better. And I mean, look at his receiving core. Like, you can maybe name like 2 guys on that receiving core, after Stephon Diggs left. So, for what he has to work with, he has a great tight end too in Kincaid and Knox. Decent offensive line too. Josh Allen is your MVP. Comeback Player of the Year, I believe, was Joe Burrow, which, a lot of Vikings fans could argue that Sam Darnold could have won that. What's your kind of take on, Sam Darnold not winning that? I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think this was definitely something that's a little bit more impressive. Kevin Seifert, he tweeted something out really, really stating something that I really agreed with was a lot of the AP voters have been told and basically almost demanded by, their superiors and at the Associated Press to really start straying away from the Comeback Player of the Year really being a, coming back from being bad or sucking award. So, unfortunately, it's one of those things where the Vikings kind of got bit in the butt in 2018 with Dalvin Cook. So he tore his ACL, had a good year the following year, and they gave it to Ryan Tannehill. And a lot of Vikings fans were like, well, Dalvin Cook should have won it because he was actually coming off an injury and had the best season out of it, but they gave it to Tannehill because he was a quarterback, and they're like, well, he came back from sucking. So, it's just one of those things the Vikings just got dealt a poor hand here. So, like I said, they really were starting to say, hey, we need to start putting people who are coming back from injury. So guys like Joe Burrow and guys like J.K. Dobbins. And I do think that they, with that being said, the criteria of being, laid out, especially for the future, I do agree with it. I think if you had put Sam Darnold as the winner, I think it kind of sets precedent for future guys where it could be a thing where, well, J.J. McCarthy or whoever, if they were to have an injury or whoever we have in the future having an injury coming back and we could get robbed of that. So, I think they got it right. I think it definitely helps set more answers more questions then leaves with more questions with this award. So I think Joe Burrow, deserved it. And I think there's a lot of guys that deserved it, but I do think that Joe Burrow was the most deserving of the award.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his stats from this whole season too. I mean, he could have, if the Bengals would have made the playoffs, I feel like he would have been top two, if anything, in MVP voting. Top three, and I think almost like passing stats. All the important ones. So I don't know, Joe Burrow. I have no problem with comeback player of the year. Basically, because he was out for quite a few games last year, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he missed about like 7-ish games. He missed
half
like
the season.
Half the season.
Yeah, so no issues with that. Defensive player of the year kind of surprised me, though. I mean, I'm not super mad about it. It just kind of surprised me. I thought it was going to go to TJ Watt, but it ended up going to Pat Surtain of the Broncos. So that one, yeah, like I said, it just kind of surprised me. I don't know.
Yeah, so Pat Surtain, he gets his first ever Defensive Player of the Year. Like you said, I think some people were picking T.J. Watt to win it, and I believe he actually didn't get that many first place votes. I'll pull that up in a second, but like I said, this was one that I kind of felt like was anybody's race. I think there's definitely a lot of guys that had an argument for it, even more than Coach of the Year. You had Myles Garrett, like you said, T.J. Watt, Pat Surtain. I mean, even like I said, Andrew Van Ginkel, I think was a dark horse candidate for that award as well, having 2 interceptions that ended up being touchdowns. So, like I said, he had the same amount of touchdowns as Trey McBride, who had 1,100 receiving yards. So, definitely something that was not to be slept on. I think like I said, he had a first place vote for Defensive Player of the Year as well. So, like I said, he was. I'm not mad about the Pat Surtain one. I understand he's definitely been the best corner in the league for a while, and I believe he's only 25-ish years old, give or take a year. So he's definitely got a lot of good football left in him. So I do think that this was definitely a well-deserved one, and one that I'm very happy with coming from him, at least winning Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, do you think Grenard or Van Ginkel could have been at least like top 3 in that voting? You think, outside of T.J. Watt and him?
Yeah, I think they could have. I mean, like I said, I just think the only problem was a lot of the medias, especially with like the AP, they really focus strictly on sacks being the number. A lot of the times they don't really look at run defense as much. Like Trey Hendrickson, I actually just pulled it up right here. So Trey Hendrickson had 11 first place votes to Pat Surtain's 26. So I think a lot of times they really just look at the sack numbers, and with Trey Hendrickson leading the league in sacks, I think that's the reason why he ended up having more. Guys like Van Ginkel, who, like I said, has really set his mark on sticking his hand out there, catching the interceptions. And Grenard, I don't know if he led the league in pressures, but he was definitely up there at the league leaders. He's definitely a very underrated guy going into the year, and now I think he's kind of starting to really start to make a name for himself. But I think they had I think it's the same as a guy like Jared Goff for the MVP. I think they had a case, like they could have been a dark horse guy, but it was one that I never really saw them for sure winning.
Yeah. If Van Ginkel had those picks like later in the season against like the Falcons and then against the Lions, if he would have just hung on to those, I think he would have definitely skyrocketed up. But outside of that, speaking of the Lions, our last award from last night, I guess the first technically award that was given was Assistant Coach of the Year, and this one I really have no gripes about because it's clear and obvious whatever fan you are. Obviously we're Vikings fans, and this has gone to Ben Johnson, former Lions offensive coordinator, now Bears head coach. So like I said, I have no gripes about it. Ben Johnson, great young offensive mind. You saw what he did with the Lions offense: Jared Goff, Amon-Ra, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. Just you can even add in there Dan Skipper and a couple of their offensive linemen. Just getting real creative, and I really like that. I feel like Brian Flores could have been up there in top votes as well. But I mean, there's a couple other guys around the league too that I'm also forgetting about.
Yeah, so like you said, Ben Johnson was the Assistant Coach of the Year. Brian Flores just finished a really close second. I think a lot of it was this one came more of like who has more of an importance on the team, and I think that Ben Johnson has more of that importance on the team. I know a lot of Viking fans are kind of going after the Lions fans because they've been insufferable for the all season long. So I think I think that's kind of why they're victory lapping pretty hard, especially on the internet right now, is just because of that. So I do think Ben Johnson. If I had to vote, I would have voted for Ben Johnson. Brian Flores, like I said, he went up against him twice. And he lost him twice. So, and I think that was another thing for Coach of the Year for Dan Campbell. But like I said, I just think that Ben Johnson had a little bit more of that importance, or a little bit more of like that landing mark with an assistant coach. And he, at the end of the day, he's the one that got the assistant head coaching, or the head coaching job, and he was the hot name. So I think that had to play a lot into it too, with him being the number one coaching candidate this coaching cycle as well. But like I said, I think this could be an award that Brian Flores wins next year. If the Vikings are a team that can be top 5 in scoring, and if their offense can be top 5 in scoring, and with JJ McCarthy under center, I think this can be an award that he's definitely going to be winning a lot more in the future. And like I said, I have no gripes with this. I understand why Ben Johnson got it. I just wanted it to be one of those things where I wanted Brian Flores to at least be competitive and not get like 3rd, 4th, or 5th place like he has in years past. So the fact that he's getting second is showing me like the voters are seeing what we're seeing. They're definitely growing, and he definitely has that importance on that team as well.
Especially after, like before the season started, everybody was like, oh, the Vikings defense isn't going to be that good. And, there's a good handful of Vikings fans that were like, our defense is going to be just fine. We have Grenard, Van Ginkel. We didn't know it was going to be necessarily this good, but, you add in like Blake Cashman, a couple other guys in there too. This defense was really, really good this past year. Eye test would probably say top 10. I mean, a couple of times it could have been top 5 too. So Brian Flores does an amazing job with the pieces that he has, and I'm excited to have him in year 3 of this Vikings team and kind of see what he brings. Hopefully we can beat the Lions at least once this year, get a split in there. But Ben Johnson's not in there, but we'll have to do that fire with the Bears now. We'll see how that turns out. But last but not least, we have our 2025 Hall of Fame inductees, and our boy, Mr. Jared Allen, has made the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Drew, how are we feeling about Jared Allen making the Hall of Fame finally, right?
Yeah, I think this was definitely long overdue. He was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate for so many years, had the one season where he almost broke the single season sack record. This was one that should have been done years ago. I really think this probably should have been done more like 4 or 5 years ago, to be honest with you. But, and I do get it. This is a class that's been very challenging, especially with how many great players have come into the league, how many players, that haven't even made the Hall of Fame. And I know a lot of fans are kind of up in arms about Luke Kuechly not getting in because he basically had the same resume as a Brian Urlacher. But a lot of this just comes down to, what kind of class you're getting into. So like guys like from a couple years ago, like Richard Seymour, he got in, which I feel like he was the guy maybe that could have waited a little bit more. But, like I said, it's just one of those things that we're going to have a strong class, we're going to have a weak class. So this was definitely a strong class, I would say for sure. Antonio Gates was also elected in. Eric Allen from the Eagles was also elected in. And then, Sterling Sharp was a guy that hasn't even been elected in yet for a long time. And he finally gets elected in. Unfortunately, you have to add another Packer player up there, but so it ends up being a wash for the game. But, the Vikings still got a lot of good players coming in. So I think there's a lot of, I think for me, I think the next player that needs to get in would be Kevin Williams. He was 2010 All-Decade, constantly a first team All-Pro. I think he's a guy that definitely needs another look, but he's not even a guy that's really getting, even final ballot votes. So, like I say, I think it's just one of those things that's really hard for a defensive tackle to get in, but, there's still a lot of good players still coming. I think the next guy that'll end up getting in will be Adrian Peterson, and I believe that's in the next couple of years. So I think he'll be one that will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. So I think there's definitely a lot of good players, that they got to compete against, and it's just unfortunate that other players can't get in, but we're definitely very happy that Jared Allen finally got the knock on his door.
Yeah, I think with Adrian Peterson, I think he has to retire first for him to be inducted. I don't think he's officially retired, has he?
No, I don't think he's technically officially retired, but I think you have to be out of the league for like 6 years. That's what the rules are. I don't think it is have to be like you have to be officially retired. I think you have to be out of the league for 6 years, because technically, you could get inducted into the Hall of Fame and still be a Hall of Fame coach. Like I think the most recent event we saw was in baseball with Tony La Russa with the White Sox, where he was out of the league for, the amount of years that qualified him for being in the Hall of Fame, and he got in, came out of retirement, ends up being a Hall of Fame coach. So it's very rare that would happen, but I think the only way like we could potentially even see this for a player standpoint would be Patrick Mahomes, to be honest with you. Like if he were to retire this year after a three-peat with 4 Super Bowl wins, I think then he's for sure in after waiting for 6 years. I think he's only 29. So, I mean, if you were to come in off of 6 years and somehow find a way back in the league, and, like I said, we've seen quarterbacks play well into their mid to late 30s and even their 40s. So, I mean, that would probably be the only one we could really probably see. I mean, maybe Bill Belichick if he came back for a coaching standpoint, but I think, those are the only ones that we'd see. But yeah, Adrian Peterson could make the Hall of Fame. It's just he has to be out of the league for those 6 years for him to be inducted in.
Because he's been out since 2021, so the years are adding up now. So
yeah,
I think a lot of fans would like Patrick Mahomes to retire, though. I think a lot of fans would like that. Me personally, I would want him to stay in the league. I like Patrick Mahomes, but a lot of other fans would like that.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think that this will be, I don't see the last run for the Chiefs, but I think in the next year or so, you're going to start seeing the newer teams come in. I think that there'll be a team that breaks out, whether that's Washington. I mean, if JJ McCarthy works out, hopefully the Vikings, fingers crossed. But I think there'll be some teams that'll dethrone him. And the fact that he's only had 1 Super Bowl loss is really surprising. It's only been to Tom Brady. I think the only times he's ever lost in the playoffs have been to Brady and then the one time against Burrow. So it's a hard guy to knock down. But, like I said, it's if you have the right team around you and you got the talent around you, it definitely makes things harder, especially with Mahomes getting paid more. So, I think within the next few years, you're going to, you'll see Mahomes' cap hit really start to increase a lot, with how much money he's taking up on their book. I think you'll start seeing the Chiefs start to, I don't want to say fall down, but they won't be making the Super Bowl every single year. So I think, like I said, hopefully we'll start to see new teams. It could be Houston, might see a Baltimore, might see a Buffalo in there. So like I said, you'll see some new teams coming in soon.
Yeah, one last thing before we hop off here too is I saw a tweet, I think it was, they're like, we were so lucky to see a Mahomes and Brady Super Bowl. Like, it's so crazy to think about that because Brady was in the AFC for so long. He was battling the Mahomes for a little bit. The Peyton Mannings, everybody else in the AFC. Where NFC, is whoever Brady or Mahomes played, right? So, I don't know. I guess we were super lucky to see that. And I think, kind of taking a look back at that, we were pretty lucky to get that.
Yeah, for sure. And I know a lot of people talk about like the GOAT debates and stuff like that. And like I said, it's one of those things where, a lot of people try to argue LeBron versus Jordan, but unfortunately we never really got that head to head because Jordan retired right when LeBron came into the league. So they never ever played head to head. So the fact that we got it, head to head, not even once, but twice, and once in the Super Bowl, and with Brady winning both of them, I think that kind of really settles it for me in my eyes. Is even at 40 years old, Brady was beating, the Patrick Mahomes teams. Like even Patrick Mahomes' best season, his first year as a starting quarterback, throwing for 50-plus touchdowns, beats him in Arrowhead. It's something that's only been done twice in his career in the playoffs. So, yeah. And then, even in the Super Bowl where, like I said, he didn't have the O-line. I get they were unhealthy, but, the fact that he went in and wasn't even close. I think they won by 22 in that or whatever. It was like 31-9, whatever my math is for
something
it. But
like that, yeah.
It's like the fact that it wasn't even close and he still put up 31 points on him. It's one of those things for me that really kind of settles it. And I don't really think he'll end up getting to 8. And with Brady having 7, I think that'll be a tall task. But yeah. I just think it'll be Brady for me. I don't really know if there's much that Patrick Mahomes could do to overtake Brady unless, he had the more Super Bowl wins than him, which, like I said, he'd be halfway there and he's already 30. So, could it happen? Maybe, but, it's very, very hard to win a Super Bowl, let alone win 4 more on top of you already winning 4. So, guys like, Montana and Bradshaw are, even those are seen as a lot with winning 4. He's looking to join an exclusive club already. The fact that you have to ask for him to even repeat that just to even beat Brady is just something that's really, really tough to do. So in my eyes, it would still be Brady for my GOAT number 1.
Oh yeah. Well, that will do it for this episode. Drew, do you have any kind of final thoughts on all the awards won? I mean, Kevin O'Connell, I mean, they didn't really do like a best celebration. I don't think that they really do that, but if that were to go to somebody, I think it'd definitely go to the Vikings and Cam Bynum and that whole crew. But other than that, it's been pretty slim.
Yeah, I think unofficially it went to the Vikings with the white chicks dance. I forgot which game that was in, but they ended up doing it again. So I think there's not, like you said, there's no official award for it, but if there was, it would have been the Vikings. But unofficially, it was the Vikings that ended up getting it. So I think for me, like really just the last thoughts of this, the thing that I just really found the most surprising was Jamar Chase not getting a single first place vote for Offensive Player of the Year.
That's crazy.
He was the guy that won the Triple Crown, the receiving Triple Crown, and Cooper Kupp just a few years ago won Offensive Player of the Year with it. And I don't know, maybe it's because of the fact that they didn't have any team success with it. I think maybe that had to do part with it, but not even the fact that he didn't even get a first place vote was the most surprising thing to me, that he didn't get that. So I thought that's just kind of like my last thoughts on it. But the fact that he didn't get a first place vote was definitely really surprising.
I think because of team success, and then, think about how many great, like not just good, but like great offensive players there are in the league that, you got your Cooper Kupps, from a few years ago that won the Triple Crown. He was probably one of maybe 3 to 5 best players in the game, maybe even just wide receivers too. But, nowadays you got Saquon, Derrick Henry, Jamar Chase, all these other players, Justin Jefferson. You got all these great players just on the offensive side of the ball. And defense, it's really hard to play defense nowadays because you got to cover guys like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, just to name a few people. There's a lot of great offensive pieces in this league, and it's hard to pick just one guy, but you really got to stand out. I mean, Jamar Chase did stand out, but Saquon Barkley had a really good season, coming from the Giants to the Eagles, and like I said, just had a really good season. So
yeah, and like I said, I understand it. So like I said, when you're winning that many games for the Bengals standpoint, you're going to be throwing a lot more. So I think I do think Cooper Kupp's Triple Crown season was the more impressive one over Jamar Chase's season. And with Cooper Kupp, I think a lot of it was just because he was so close to 2K, and they were winning games on top of that, so they were also running the ball at a respectable rate versus the Bengals, who were constantly having to throw just to keep themselves in the game. So I do get it wouldn't have been my Offensive Player of the Year vote, but I just thought maybe at least one other person would have picked him. Just at least one other person would have picked him at least, but nobody even picked him. So.
Right. Well, hopefully our boy Justin Jefferson can get some type of award like that in the next couple of years. I know he won Offensive Player of the Year a couple of years ago, but with that said, KO is your Coach of the Year, fellas. Couldn't be any more happy with that, honestly. So hopefully that's one of many in the future. Maybe a couple MVPs for maybe our boy Justin Jefferson or J.J. McCarthy or whoever it is. Somebody on the Vikings can win a couple more awards, make the Super Bowl or something like that.
Yeah.
That's what our goal is. So with that said, make sure you guys subscribe if you are watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you guys hit us a follow. We did hit 100 subscribers on YouTube a couple weeks ago now. Thank you guys for subscribing and watching our content. And yeah, can't thank you guys enough. So see you guys in the next episode. Skol Vikes.